And welcome back from lunch. As we said, we will try to keep you awake by not having many presentations or too many slides, and we are actually turning the tables around and we will ask you questions. So definitely listen, don't look at your phones too much, don't fall asleep, because later we will ask you a few questions and how you would solve some tricky real life situations that some of us here experience every day in our work. So I'm with the Open Contracting Partnership, and we work with reformers all over the world, people like you, to ensure that procurement, like we heard this morning, is not a compliance-driven box-ticking exercise. But we, like many of you here, believe that procurement can be a tool that can transform how governments deliver and create business opportunities for companies, but also create benefits for citizens. So procurement is really the moment when budgets become the roads and the schools and the medicines that everyone cares about, and also delivers economic development to entrepreneurs. So where do we do this work? We work with many of you here in this room. We have the pleasure to both work in Ukraine and in Italy. Some of the leaders in the field are Ukraine, we have Nigeria here, we have Serbia here, we work in Lithuania and in Bosnia. We are Kyrgyz, just started also working on open contracting, and is already showing some first results. So Afghanistan is in the room as well. So we are very pleased to see so many of you here. And the results can be really tremendous. So when you open up the contracting process. And with contracting process, I really mean all the way from planning through to tender, award, and implementation, and share and use information for decision making, and then engage both government officials, companies, and civil society to make decisions and to hold the process accountable. You can see huge benefits. Alex in a moment will tell us some of those benefits, but in Ukraine they were able to save billions of dollars. They were able to lower prices for essential medicines such as chemotherapy medicines, and they were also able to show that trust in the system improved. We have no one from Latin America here, I believe, but in Bogota, for example, the capital city of Colombia, the Ministry of Education partnered with the procurement agency and parents, and they changed completely how they're procuring school meals for the kids in the city, and they were able to break up a cartel, lower the prices, have new vendors enter the market, while also delivering higher quality meals to kids. So that is really the sweet spot when you get higher quality standards, lower prices, and more vendors. So these are the kind of benefits that you can see when you incorporate open contracting into your procurement strategies. And there are three things that we believe are important to do. One is having a goal. Too often, procurement and contracting still happens with no goal in mind, and people just follow the process. But for example, if your goal is to increase the participation of SMEs in your markets, which often nowadays is a goal for many governments, you need to make sure that you have key performance indicators and that you follow them and have the necessary data to track that goal. The second important element is that you embed procurement in larger reforms. So before we heard about the importance of pre-qualifications. That's a very important step to get more SMEs to participate in the marketplace. But what maybe matters even more is that you make it easy for them, right, to submit a tender, that you make it easy for them to register, that you pay them on time. All of those things matter when you try to achieve results, when you combine procurement with larger reforms. And the third important step, and that's what Alex will talk to us about, is reform management. You can't forget that doing these things are complex. So you need to navigate the politics. You need to know who your friends and who your enemies are. You need to be smart in your communications, right? Because most people, they are not like us. They fall asleep when they hear the word procurement. So you need to be smart about how you sell your mandate and try to get others on board. And I look forward to hear more about how Ukraine and Alex did that.
So Alex, the floor is yours. Maybe you can find, maybe Simona can give you a microphone. And maybe, if I understand correctly, it is a case study that shows how, concretely, the three or four goals that Kathrin just mentioned have been achieved. Okay, the floor is yours.
Yes, thank you very much. Hi all, my name is Olekasandr Starodubtsev, and I am the former head of the Public Procurement Department in the Ministry of Economy of Ukraine. Here in the case, you're in my position. So in 2015, just imagine that you're the newly appointed head of the Public Procurement Department in the Ministry, and you have a bunch of problems described in the case. Who didn't read the case during the break? Okay, no, nobody. Okay, the plan is I will just brief you with some slides for better understanding the situation where I am and you are according to the case, and then we'll try to structure all the problems and find the solutions. Please don't try to fall asleep. In 2014, we in Ukraine had a revolution. And here you see the most expensive bridge in the world. It worth more than $1 billion, and it's not finished yet. And our government is continuing to build it. And here on these pictures below, you can see the premises of our former president who escaped to Russia 5 years ago already, rather shiny guy. So at 2014, we really had a call for reform. And this is true. The civil society, the government, the business, all together were eager to do something with the public procurement because it was a synonym of corruption. We built the so-called hybrid system. So we have platforms in our system, but we have the one central database where all the information is stored. How do you think, for which purpose do we need a platform? Platforms. It's your time to say. Yes. The question is, why in the procurement system you need platforms? Why Ukraine need platforms in that position in 2015? It's better to have transparency in one system. Competition between whom and whom? Between platforms, because they're direct competitors providing the service. Is the government the best service provider, usually? No. So we need somebody to replace the government within service providing. What are other reasons could be? The competition. They increase the level of service. Value. Altogether, the whole system is more expensive because you have to pay to the platforms, to the central database, so the system is more expensive. Doesn't matter in this case. Actually, they create innovation. How innovative usually is the government? This is a joke, yes? Government is not innovative only in Ukraine. So bring in their platforms, bring in their business and competition, you bring their innovations. And in the situation of Ukraine, where nobody trusts nobody, nobody trusts anybody, we have somebody to speak to business in their language. Because usually when we, the government, come to business and say, guys, let's trade with the government, what they say? Good luck, yes. So we need somebody to provide the service. And that was the system which was designed and at the period of the time of the case already launched in an MVP mode, minimum viable product mode. So it existed, but only for the below the threshold procurement, and honestly it didn't work properly. This is the timeline of your life before becoming the head of the department in public procurement in Ukrainian ministry. You started that initiative as a volunteer just after our revolution. Then you were trying to get the stakeholders coalition around your idea. Then you finally, after the third attempt, create such a coalition, and then you became the part of a government. Actually, you didn't want to. Why? No trust. No trust. I was a business. You're in my position. I was a rather decent businessman with a good career. I didn't trust the government. I didn't want to be a part of a government. Why did I decide to come to the government? There is no other way to create a big reform and big system if you are not a government. Okay, so now let's discuss the case. You are in the position of the new director of public procurement department, and there are a bunch of problems. Could you just start naming them?
You can go through the case study.
The case study.
That was distributed or not? It is?
So what are some of
Do you
the
all have
problems
this?
that you think you had?
So maybe you can
So I
go
heard
through.
maybe you had no allies, maybe you had weak staff. Those were two.
Kathrin?
Conservative
Let's
stuff.
just make a list of them and then discuss what are your priorities. Where would you start? So the first is the team. What is it about the team in the case? I don't trust them.
I heard no talent. Someone said
Support from the government.
Team.
Actually, the team is the procurement department staff who had been working in the department before me and continue working now.
No
I don't
skills.
trust them. They don't trust me. So the usual situation for the new director. And this is a problem. Good idea. How? Okay, let's discuss it a little bit further, and now just list the problems. What are other problems you have in the case? Yes. Money?
money, no funding.
Money. No funding. Exactly.
It's the first one.
Did I hear someone else saying something here? Other problems that you have?
Why you
right
don't?
now?
By the way, why you don't have money?
Because the World Bank did not fund.
And
it's
EBRD
true.
either.
EBRD either.
Yeah, this is true. They did a step.
Yeah.
Please, what was another problem?
But why don't fund it just from the government?
Because
Because this
you must show the business plan of your activities in the future with timelines, with everything.
And because this
To
is
get
public
money,
procurement.
To get money. Bank approach.
Okay, the problem with the money. What else? Vested interest. What about vested interest in the case?
So vested interest or corruption is another problem. Anyone wanted to say more about that?
Money.
What else? In Ukraine, you don't have anything stable, including legal system.
Someone said you don't have a law,
We didn't have a law, definitely.
so no legal frameworks.
Legal framework. Zhenya, okay, counted. Legal framework.
Yeah.
Okay,
Did
what
you
else?
No? Oh.
There is many information in the
Other things.
case.
Maybe something about politics. Do you think they had a lot of political support to do this?
Alexander, what about clear objectives?
Thank you so much. The goals.
Clear objectives. Also for the department who was going to manage this platform.
The goals. There is a clear information about that in the case, that my work is regulated by 4 documents. And in none of these documents is anything about public procurement, about the digitalization of public procurement. Just some general words that you should increase, make better, etc. Many documents that you should take into account, and nothing about your concrete goal, why you came to this department. Is it a problem? I noted it here. What else? IT experts. We were lucky. At that period of time, we had many of them because after the revolution, many people were ready to contribute. Political support. At that period of time, we already, and this is, it's mentioned in a case that at that period of time, we had already the support from the minister, from the deputy minister. There is one guy which support we didn't have. let's mention that, by the way. Look at me. I don't have any experience in public procurement. Okay.
I think one more, maybe public awareness, how to use the data based, generated from the system, or how to use the systems once it's developed. So that
Actually,
might all be a risk.
At that period of time, it was a huge call for reform, and the civil society just say, give us any information. It's not only about the data, give us PDFs, give us anything. We want to understand why the government spends so huge money for example, the bridge, which I just shown. I can write it down. No clear understanding what to do with the data. Okay, what else? It's hot.
It sounds like you have a large daily workflow that you have to get through.
Thank you. Workflow. Do you always understand what are you signing? I was in a position where I didn't understand anything. So as a civil activist, I came to this area with clear understanding that public procurement is something very simple. And because I have a good business experience, I will immediately understand how to work it out. I was wrong and very naive. Yes, so I received every day many documents to sign. I tried to understand what I'm signing, and they couldn't. And this is a problem. What else? Let's include it to the workflow, because bureaucracy is usually the workflow you have to manage. The only probably thing we had at that period of time was leadership. We had this clear call for reform and clear understanding that we will do this reform or die. Yes.
Maybe the timeline, because the country was impatient, so you really didn't have 2 years to develop the program. It had to be really fast. Yes.
Okay.
I have a question for you, Alexander.
Yes.
Do you think that moving into this department of the ministry, who already had a previous role and previous workflow, was a good idea? Because you were added there in addition to the previous activity, so there was no historical knowledge of what you were going to become, and no separation of duties. I don't think that a department who decides the policy and the legal framework, which is extremely difficult and technical, can also take over such a new duty. Separation of duties might have been
I
a
agree
problem.
that it was a bad idea, but what other options
Well, the Italian,
do you have?
The Italian experience can be inspiring. So a state-owned company of the ministry doing only one thing, developing the platform. It's not a Roman concept. It's the idea that if you are within the public administration, and the public administration is unskilled, resistance, no money, no separation of duties, you have to do no legal framework to support you, and no clear goals, yes, you have the support. But if you have the support of the government, capitalize on this support and maybe suggest to put in place the correct structure to develop the platform. Not just reusing what is there, doing something else, with probably no skills and no clear motivation.
So again, what is an option? To use the public company to do that?
The state, the ministry could put in place, could create state-owned companies. Do you have state-owned companies?
Yes, of course. And by the way, there is information in the case that the guy who is leading this kind of state-owned company This is my cabinet at that period of time, and this is his cabinet. This is not himself. You don't see the presentation, or you see.
Yes.
This is the cabinet of the former head of this SOE. You have a whiteboard, the clipboard, the hidden door, and the private bathroom, and the private furniture, and all of that stuff. Yes, we have this SOE, the state-owned enterprise. Yeah. But really, bad guy is leading it.
But you were going to be the SOE. You, a person who was coming from outside of the government, a person who was reliable, a person who wanted to bring innovation and to do something new after the revolution, as head of this SOE. You were going to represent the new reality.
Okay, it can be accepted, guys. Let's just let me show you 2 more slides for your understanding. One thing that you didn't mention in this case is a bad environment. For me, it's a real problem. I'm a former businessman. I get used to a good environment and work. And I'm really struggling with this old Soviet type building. Do you know what is Soviet type? You know. The light is flashing in these corridors. It's very Soviet. It's very old style. It's awful. And here is my cabinet with the classical, you know, this KGB guy cabinet. The safe, the flower, the portrait of a president. I'm sure they existed. Of course, there were no any whiteboard there. I brand mine. I brand there my coffee machine as well. To create at least some kind of environment where people want to produce something. Because usually our environment in the civil service, I don't know how in your countries it's settled, but in our country, everything is done in a way that people don't want to come to work and work there. Yes, the long corridor and many doors, and people like in cages. So, very many problems for you as a new head of the Department of Public Procurement Regulation. I'll put here 10 environment. And let's discuss. Where would you start? Coffee machine and whiteboard. The right answer, actually, I did exactly this way, but I'm sure from the theoretical point of view, looking at this case, where would you start? Goals. The good news that I'm not alone. There was a civil initiative already almost a year, and this civil initiative supports me and you as the new head of the department. The question is that nobody from them wants to go and join you in the government. They don't trust, they don't have savings to work. In Ukrainian government, if you want to work in Ukrainian government, you should have savings. Because salaries are so low that you cannot afford living and working there for a long period of time. So you have support, you have people, but they don't work for the government. And you still have a problem with the team, with people who are working now in the government. Existing stuff. So where would you start? The team, money, legal framework, goals, environment, coffee machine and whiteboard. Making the team.
So
How?
I heard team, someone else said goal. What did you say? Making a new team. So getting a new team, having a goal. What else? Would someone start somewhere else?
Actually, Kathrin, let's stop here because goal and the team, these were our answers on all of that.
Very good.
We started with the goal and the team. They didn't allow me, I mean organizers, they didn't allow me to make the full presentation about Prozoro life hacks and how we did the reform, in fact. But they promised me that all our life hacks will be in materials. And if anybody is interested, yes. Yes, sorry. Organizers of the conference. The organizers of the conference didn't allow me to make the whole case because I needed an hour and a half for that. But the whole life hacks or how we did this reform will be in materials. That was my message. And here we have some shorter option of the presentation. Where we start and where I would start in that position. I would start with goals. How to define and clarify goals. And the strategy. The strategy of the reform. Where would you start with the goals? Very good option. What is your opinion? You started analyzing what's going on, the situation as is. You are starting to planning to be. You understand as is, you understand to be, you more or less understand how to get from as is to be. Will people share your dreams and struggle with you? Guys, this is an interesting question to all of you. For example, you create the strategy. Will people who already exist in the department, will they share your dreams, your call for reform? Will they help you? No. Yes, which one?
Use the microphone.
Yes, sorry.
To give the money, the first approach, and to make the believe in you and your ideas. Ideological and material.
Thank you so much. Very good answer. The question is that you cannot give them money. It's impossible according to our civil service regulation, etc. And they are paid really low. So you cannot work with money. But what you can do with them, you can do them reasons. You can do them senses. You can do them dreams. How would you do that? Say what? To pray together?
I guess he means have a vision and build up a following that they follow you, I assume.
Okay,
Leadership,
yeah.
be a leader.
And probably this is exactly what we starting to do, is almost praying together. We start with these deep questions: who we are, why are we here, what is public procurement, what is public interest, why do we need all of that? And it is a surprise, but probably we became first people, I mean me, and I will explain how I acquired the new team, new part of a team, meaning by we. But we asking people, existing people, very sensitive and important questions. And probably we were the first during 15 years about that. And they joined. Okay, you start creating sense and then creating some strategy. What next? What is next?
I heard capacity building here.
What is it?
I had a similar experience.
Oh.
Yes, in Security and Exchange Commission. I went there. No one from the staff was asked for anything before. And they were not motivated. And on the other hand, they were fighting each other, who is going to be on better position and so on.
Exactly.
And then what I did, very simple issues I did. We have a commission, 5 of us, and I started to ask them, for certain cases, how would you solve this case?
Uh-huh.
They started to give answers. I said, okay, what are the arguments? They gave arguments. Then we made decision, which was based on their
consensus.
Arguments.
Uh-huh.
And then they started to go to internet, to learn by themselves. They said, it's unbelievable that we are involved in the process. That is first thing. Second thing, some of them came to me to accuse the other one. I said, just a second, I have to make a phone call to invite that person immediately to resolve this problem. Immediately, first person gave up.
Mm-hmm.
And the third thing, I had to sometimes took them till midnight. And after that, I saw them, I don't know, somewhere else, not in the office. And they started to apologize. I said, why you are apologizing? You have to be there only when you think that it is important for the job. It is unusual in public sector. Usually it's important when you came, when you leave. But what were the effects was not important.
Mm-hmm.
I was there 9 months. Usually we need 9 months here.
Yeah, to burn something.
And then after that it was completed. Reform was unbelievable.
Uh-huh.
And of course, then what I also had to do is to train media, because for financial market it is extremely important that media give the appropriate picture and the information
and increase
they
trust.
Understand.
Mm-hmm.
So
thank you so much. Very interesting experience. Yes.
Yes. I mean, we focused on the challenges and difficulties. Now, in the facts, I'm wearing my lawyer hats. There is a potential assistance that you have, which is you led before a group of volunteers.
Yes.
Now, in principle, that could be, volunteers means people that they give their free time because they believe in something, they believe in change, and perhaps they could continue that. Now, in principle, this should be a group of people that you could informally or formally fall back into and use to support the beginning of the process, unless, of course, these people, which will continue giving their time for free, will feel resentment towards you that now you are paid for doing that something that before you were doing it, I think, as a volunteer.
Uh-huh. Interesting question. I was paid so low that there were no any jealousy regarding that, but you came to another second priority, to the team. What to do with the team? Should you hire new people as a new head of the department and fire all previous? Should you hire somebody and keep somebody existing? What will be your strategy with people? What would you do?
We have heard here less from this side of the room. What did people do in similar situations? Hire, fire.
Guys, do you understand? Sorry, sometimes my English is not perfect, but do you understand the question? Yes?
Yes.
You have the challenge with the team. You have an option: or hire new people and fire old people, or hire new people and keep some part of old people. What would you do?
Yeah.
You cannot. There is a big revolution and budget crisis. You don't have money.
Yeah.
And what to do? And very good option and very good question. What to do with volunteers? What to do with approximately 10 people who supported you, who supported not you but the reform on the way, and are ready to be involved part-time in the future?
Yeah.
But nobody from volunteers is ready to go to the civil service. Nobody.
Some kind of transition, not to completely get rid of the old public procurement staff, because you need some kind of knowledge on laws and regulations, but also to insert some new ideas through somehow employing those volunteers, part of the team of the volunteers.
Thank you very much. This is exactly what we did. Again, there is the best expertise and the best people in public procurement in Ukraine was working in this department. And they are really cool. The problem is that some other people were working there either. And you had to get rid of them in this or that way. And that was my challenge, how to manage that. But the interesting thing for me personally was that the key expertise and the best experts were working in this department. And by the way, they are working there after my resignation a half a year ago. And one of, I grew 2 replacements for myself and two successors, and one of them successfully replaced me after I resigned from the public procurement department. But these people are really great. But will you manage the reform just keeping the old people?
We have one more idea here.
Yes.
Yeah,
Just a second. One
yeah,
by one.
I second the previous opinion that you need to sit with the team, engage with them, and individually you need to evaluate their competencies, skills, and experience, and you need to seek their interests and their capability in order to form the team. Some teams, they will not stay with you. They need to move or rotate to another department. That's you need as a good leaders in order to cope up with the requirement. You need to shift them to another department and try to inject more people, new one, or from the experience or from the other department in order to move forward.
To increase, to check the capacity, to check the motivation.
Their competencies and skills.
Competencies.
Yes.
And then decide.
Yes.
Good option. Yes.
Okay. So, well, I was thinking of if you didn't have any political issue with your old crew members, and there's, I mean, experience is always a need. Why should not keep them? I mean, it could be useful. People knew their job.
Why not keeping all the people? Because, so your question is to make the reform, why you shouldn't keep all old people in the department? I mean existing, not all, they're young, but existing people who worked before you and make the reform? The question is why they didn't make the reform for 15 years? Maybe they didn't have a good leader. Can leader be just himself without the new culture? Yes.
It could be to answer. I had the same experience. I was I was invited as vice president for administration of finance in one of the most corrupted state university in my country in Pangasinan. So it's like an interim process. So what I did first is, of course, I couldn't change the people there because they are occupying permanent position. So what I did is evaluate all of their performance and then check who have these issues on possible corruption. And then I told them, you know, I reviewed all of the contracts prior to my assumption to office, and these are all your accountabilities. But moving forward, I'm not going to do anything about it yet because I will allow the audit personnel to do it. So it's like with a team that were involved in all of the corruption, and I became the chairman of the procurement, and I couldn't change them. So it's like telling them, we're not gonna continue the process, but if anything that you will do under my supervision now will be the same, I can easily revive all of your cases. Mm-hmm. So it's like telling them, if you had
blackmailing.
If you did it before, don't do it under my nose right now, because definitely I will make you accountable. So I think
thank you very much for sharing this experience. Actually, I was lucky. Again, the people who worked in this department had the best expertise in the country about public procurement. And they are really fantastic experts. What is the problem? The problem was in the management. Because people who are usually best experts, they are arguing between themselves, usually as experts. Which expertise is bigger? And what we need in the reform, we needed the management. And the only way is to introduce the management in this situation is to find some small quantity of new people with good management experience who can join this existing team and convert the culture there. Do you understand what I'm talking about? Where would you find such people?
McKinsey, private sector.
How much time do we have, actually? University Tor Vergata.
15 minutes.
Okay. I don't know, it was my experience, but I usually use Facebook. I just wrote on Facebook that, guys, hello, I'm the new director of the public procurement department. We occupied, with the civil society, occupied the department the first time. And I invite everybody who is ready to work there for, if I'm not wrong, $200 per month to change, but have a chance to change the country and show yourself and your family that you can decent citizen of that country. And they found people what is interested. For 25, I had the department of 40 people. I cut it like 15. And for 25 existing people, I found 5 new. So the proportion is 5 new for 25 existed. And it works. Because people from the market came on a very low position. They wasn't interested, they were not interested in any kind of position. They were interested in getting things done, in delivering the reform. And here is probably, if you have the sense and the idea and the dream, here is probably the most key part of any reform, because no leader can work alone. I don't know your experience, but you can blackmail old people, of course, but it's better to stop arguing about the past and try to merge about discussing the future. At least this is our recipe how to...
I have a question, please.
Yes.
What was the profile of these people? Because in my opinion, anyone who has certain knowledge, background, or anything would never, or it's really not so common that they will accept your invitation, if you know what I mean. If someone is an expert, has been working, I don't know for how many years, and they would really, in my opinion, have to have some real enthusiasm or any idea in order to accept your invitation. So what was the profile of the people that...
Perfect question, thank you so much. We had a really interesting situation in the department when me, myself, and 5 new people have more or less decent experience in management and no expertise in public procurement. And all other people have huge and good expertise in public procurement and lack of expertise in management. And we build the community where we need each other. Of course, for the first time, they didn't appreciate much my appearance there, but it was political decision. The minister appointed myself, so what could they do? And by the way, people in the ministry, they usually get used.
I think that the question was, why could you get such good people if you paid them so little? But I think it was the aftermath after revolution. So people really wanted to do this for free. Not every country has a revolution.
Just patriotism.
Right? So,
just the only argument I have, the patriotism.
Alexander, let me just say something. The driver of this discussion is that we are the day after a revolution. So the motivation, it's not a question of money, it's not a question of profile, it's a question of wanting to change the country, to get rid of the corrupt. There is no money and no profile that can be more important than that. So you were very lucky, on the one hand, to be fit in that position in that moment, because you did find volunteers who came there with too many skills against what you needed and less money. But you were lucky enough because it was the day after a great revolution.
Angela, if we position it that way, we can come to the conclusion that the only way to reform public procurement is a revolution.
Public procurement is a reform, Alexander. Public procurement is a reform. It can come after or before or without a revolution, but it's a reform.
Yes.
So you have to create an enabling environment disregarding the rest, the past and the future.
Yes,
the enabling environment is missing everywhere, without or with a revolution. That's my point.
Good comment. I think our case is a classical change management case, where you can actually change any area, and here public procurement is just an example that you can change public procurement. Of course, we were lucky. I can say that we were lucky with the revolution because 77 people were killed in one day on the Central Square. So I don't think that this situation is the best luck for any country. But of course, we used that situation to grow this to grow this patriotism and invite people to the civil service only on volunteer basis, because the salaries are really awful. Okay, the goal, the team, what would be your other point? Where would you come further?
In the corner there, yeah.
The best way is to attract IFIs and to ask them for the transactionary technical assistance. They will come, they will help you with good cooperation, you will have a best public procurement in your country, and that's all. So why to suffer so much? Later on you will find nice people to work there with you, etc.
Announced on the right of advertising, yes. Actually, it's a really dangerous point to discuss here all together with the camera on. But as I understand, IFIs are working in many countries. Can IFIs do the reform instead of you?
Together.
Never. And this is my point either.
But also just to say that Ukraine in that position did not get the support.
I will comment that, but off records. Regarding the role and the role of IFIs in the reform. Okay, I have, I think, 5 minutes.
Alexander, you have 5 minutes, but can I ask you before you finish to just explain a little bit what Prozoro is, what kind of contracts, the values, a little bit more about the platform. This is very interesting, but maybe...
But this is a public procurement conference.
Of course, so... And digital procurement is the issue of the day. So, two last minutes explaining to us the added value of Prozoro today in Ukraine. Thank you.
I will finish the presentation and then, okay, two more slides from my side and then explain what Prozoro is now. And I'm rather open because I left Prozoro a year and a half ago, so I can criticize it freely and openly. This is the situation, how it goes. After solving all these problems one by one, getting better experience, I finally came to the conclusion that the main point here is sense and culture. Prozoro succeeded. I think it succeeded because we managed to build a Prozoro team. And here in this t-shirt, I represent Prozoro team because we usually come to work this way, very informal, very open, without any bureaucracy, without any statuses. Usually all bureaucracy and statuses, I mean government bureaucracy and statuses, they harm the relations in the team. We needed, after my appearance in the department, 1 more year to adopt necessary legislation, to build necessary software, and to probably the main thing, to communicate our reform well. We have 25 regions in Ukraine. We visited all of them and explained contracting authorities what Prozoro is. And believe me, all contracting authorities were very unhappy about any changes that they should follow. But if you work with them openly and sincerely, they finally come to your point. And in a year, Prozoro became obligatory for Ukraine. This is the picture which I replaced 10 slides of real life hacks of Prozoro, which are presented in materials. I hope if you're interested, you can ask the organizers the materials. I think that everything starts from census team and end up by brands and something very deep in human nature. You can see me, all these bracelets, t-shirts. In Prozoro, we produced many kind of souvenir products for ourselves. Our Prozoro flag was on tops of many mountains. It's like a flash mob going to travel somewhere to bring your flag and have a picture there. So we created fun, we created team, and having common senses and having common culture, we finally overcome all the bureaucracy and workflow problems and build this system. And of course, this is some probably unique situation, and we were lucky. But one takeaway slide for you. In any situation in your current area, you usually have some options where you have a space for improvement. My takeaways from this reform and Prozoro, that usually reform is more like a startup, and it's very weird to try to perform startup in a very bureaucratic and government way. You should have your right for tries and errors. And as in any startup, the team and the pace are more critical than expertise, relations with IFIs, I'm sorry, and all these process-oriented bureaucracy things. I don't know if such a format was comfortable for you, but I understood that making the presentation after lunch, the only way not to allow you to fall asleep is to present it this way. Two more things about Prozoro. You mean which procedures Prozoro have?
Do all of you know Prozoro, the platform? No. Some people don't know.
But Alec, maybe also describe how it was the golden triangle and then some of the results that you saw. Yeah.
Prozoro is a policy and compromise between government, civil society, and the business, how the public procurement ecosystem should be organized in a country. We have the central database which belongs to the government and operates all the data. We have these commercial platforms as intermediaries between central database and all contracting authorities and business, because we believe in this distributed system. As any country, we have open tender, negotiation procedure, some kind of post-qualification, pre-qualification. We have all these pouring procurement procedures and bureaucracy than probably any of you. The interesting thing that we managed to involve civil society, maybe because Ukrainian civil society is very active, on an absolutely different level of engagement to the public procurement. Because in addition to Prozoro, in Ukraine we have another system called Dozoro, which Prozoro in Ukrainian means transparent, Dozoro in Ukrainian means watcher. And this is the watching platform where civil society control the government by using all the data replicable from the main database. So a separate platform controlled by Transparency International Ukraine, where you have ratings of contracting authorities, all risk management tools, data analysis, and many other experiments which usually the government cannot afford to do, but the civil society can experiment and then transfer to the government. This is, by the way, the main algorithm how Prozoro was created. All new innovations are usually piloted on the civil society basis, and if they work, further they are transferred to the government.
Maybe professional deformation. Are all the procedures of the contracting authorities there? Is it mandatory to use this platform to manage a procedure?
Yes, yes.
Any value, for any kind of value?
For above the threshold procedure, of course we have a law, but below the threshold procedure you can use this simplified procedure, and good contracting authorities, some of them in the room by the way, they can say all their experience about using the below the threshold procedure. It's very short, it's very simple, so in 3 days you can conduct a tender, but it will be part of Prozoro and it will be transparent tender.
And maybe unusual, the Ministry of Defense is also using it, state-owned enterprises are using it now, so it is very
Ministry of Defense is using it for non-secret procurement as usual, Ministry of Defense, and more or less satisfied with that.
Well, it's mandatory, I
it's
found.
mandatory.
So everybody is using it.
For above the threshold procurement, you're obliged to use it. For below the threshold procurement, you can use it.
And is it easy for an Ukrainian citizen to enter and to understand, to interpret this data?
I think yes, but it's better to ask from Ukrainian citizen. You understand that any procurement data is complex, and it's usually. Do we have an internet now? Can we download bi.prozoro.org?
Annalisa.
Prozoro is no. Prozoro is better.
Internet.
Because we were a civic initiative as a present, as a grant on the way, we received the ClickView BI tool for us as a present. So now all the procurement data are presented through BI, very powerful BI, which any Ukrainian citizen can look at. The question what Ukrainian citizen can understand there. And this is an issue that we faced, and that's why we created a separate think tank in Kyiv School of Economics. We created a separate institution, a think tank which can work with the data. Because usually the more data you have, the more questions you have about this data and how to use it.
Yes.
This is the challenge, but you understand that public procurement reform and development is a never-ending story. The more data, the better your procedures, the more data you have, the more ideas you have how to use this data. Yes.
Now, I think we can start collecting from. Have you finished?
Sorry for stealing all the time from you, both of you.
Thank you so much. Yes, I wanted to start a question and answer time, of course, to both the two speakers, but to Kathrin and Alexander.
Thank you, Alexander. I'm very interested in your platform because in China, as a big country, we are building thousands of similar platforms. So I have two questions. First, what's the nature of the platform? In China, we have three kind of platform. One is for the trading, transaction platform for the both parties for trade. Second is for the government to supervise the transaction. Third is for the public to have the data and for the transparency issues. So first question, what's the nature of your platform? Second is, does the platform covers all sectors, all provinces and cities, and all levels of governments? So what's the range of the platform?
Starting from the second one, yes, all layers of all government, central government, regional government, state-owned enterprises, all these institutions are covered by public procurement law. All of them are obliged to use Prozoro for above the threshold procurement and can use Prozoro for below the threshold procurement. This is the question what Angela asked me before. Regarding your question, the first question, the system is open sourced, so you can just download the code from GitHub and use it for your country without any obligations for Ukraine. It's very open. It belongs to Transparency International Ukraine, so you can easily use it. And what we have in the system, we have data. And how to represent this data and show this data, this is the second question. We have our public procurement portal where you can see all the information about the concrete tender. We have the BI tool, business intelligence tool, where all this data is aggregated and you can compare two regions between themselves about one subject of procurement. You can compare one contracting authorities for different time slots, for example. So all the data is open. All the data is kept in the government database, but through API, you can download all the data for yourself. So all the data is open. And for example, Dozoro, the civil society portal, is downloading their copy of the database to themselves and using it for Dozoro for another reasons. All the data is open. The data belongs to the government, but any organization can download it for free and use it for any reason you want. For example, US universities download our data for auctions because this is a perfect material for game theory.
Another question from here, thank you. Thank you, Kathrin, for handing over the microphone. You should be a speaker sitting here.
Thank you. When you say all the data, can you just explain what data is made available, whether it's like the contract notice data and award notices, or does it go down into, the tender submissions, those sorts of things?
Very good question. We started from obvious data, contracting authority, supplier, their codes, registry codes, the time of the tender, all the information about the stages of the tender, they are data-driven. The information about tender documents, we started it as PDFs. And now is a huge process of switching to this field format where all the data is organized in a data-driven way. And this is the very tough compromise that we took during the process of developing the system, because we had huge risk that we didn't launch the system if we do everything properly. That's why it was a compromise to start with PDFs and then move step by step to this data-driven format. Unfortunately, this movement was 3 years long.
And what about issues of confidentiality? How is that dealt with tender information?
We are staying on the position that all the data in public procurement system are open. I mean, after disclosing of the results of the tender, of course, in this period before disclosing the data, all of that is confident and saved and kept by the government security. But after that, all the information is open, and our message to business, for example, if you don't want for your data to be disclosed, please don't trade with the government, because all this kind of data should be disclosed because taxpayers should know. And we have a lot of funny stories about that when the person is uploaded the copy of passport, for example, and then is calling to us crying that somebody will receive a credit in a bank using this copy of passport. And we are saying that probably this is not a problem of Prozoro, but problem of bank and crooks, and not our. But we still kept the position where all the data should be disclosed.
Kathrin, coming back to confidentiality, this copes very well with the position of open contracting partnerships. So in public procurement, there should be no confidentiality. Can you tell us something a little bit more about this position from OCP, and also about this publication you made a couple of years ago, yes. Mythbusting Public Procurement Confidentiality. It's interesting to read.
Right. So we have a Mythbuster where we try to address, because you're obviously not the only one who has concerns about confidentiality. And our wide ask is that everything should be open, and there are countries like Ukraine or in Slovakia actually that you need to publish the whole contract before it actually can be executed, otherwise it's not valid. Obviously there are things like intellectual property rights or other things that have to stay confidential, at least for a while, and that's okay, because certain things need to be protected. But what we have learned by doing this research and talking to many reformers and many government companies, that much less has to be confidential, that many things try to be hidden, or it's just easier to say it has to be secret, and that no one wins when you have paper that turns yellow in styling in storage cabinets because no one knows the information. So I have this here if anyone wants to read it.
I encourage to read it because it's extremely interesting.
Yeah.
This openness of data, does that also refer to not the winning bid, so the other bids, or do you only publish the data on the winning bid?
It depends. So different countries, different governments do it differently. There are some who publish all the bidders. Yes.
In Ukraine, we are publishing everything.
Exactly.
In Ukraine, the Prozoro system gives the possibility to publish all the bidders, information about all the bidders and actually all the bids. And we also publish the procurement contract and all amendments to procurement contract. And at the end of fulfillment of procurement contract, we also publish the report, the appropriate report. So Prozoro system provides more transparency than European directives actually require. So as Alexander mentioned, we used the Georgian experience, and their principle, everyone sees everything. but we actually, in Ukraine, the procurement department actually improved this concept, and as a representative of a procurement entity, I can confirm that this system is client-friendly. It's very useful, very comfortable for a procurement officer to use, and just applause to our heroes.
Very good question about disclosing the data, because in the situation of total distrust in a country, the only way is to disclose everything. But on probably the third year of Prozoro development, we had this pain in the head that sometimes disclosing the information beats your efficiency, and probably not disclosing everything allows you to save money on tenders, etc. And we asked our Kyiv School of Economics, the best think tank in the country regarding procurement data, to make this survey for us. And they then came back with their observations that probably we should still keep all the data. Again, we are a European country. Of course, Ukraine is Europe, but the situation of distrust in the country is totally non-European. That's why this is the only way how to bring and keep this trust to the system, to disclose everything.
Angela, can I ask you a question?
Thank you very much.
Does Italy, somebody has to explain me this open contracting platform. At least compare with, at least compare with the full digitalization, which is the European concept of publicity or transparency. Is it the equal or the similar? Is it the equal or the similar? And I would like you to say, do you have in Italy this open, fully digitalized platform for the public procurement?
Thank you for this question.
Everything is visible, transparent, and in...
I was really hoping to talk about Italy a little bit, moving from Ukraine and from OCP. Well, the move towards a full digitalization process in Italy has been made many years ago. We have this national e-procurement platform available since 2003, 2004. It is the platform of the Ministry of Economy and Finance, so it's the government platform, no cost in using it, but CONSIP is managing this platform. We are making a step-by-step approach towards open data. So we have our open data platform, open data portal within the platform, so you can enter and be informed about who, how much is spending and who from. It is fully open. The point is, it is a step-by-step approach. We are still not covering all the phases end-to-end of the procedure, okay? You have documentation, you have numbers, you have information. You also have already aggregated reports, if you want an aggregated report. In addition to this, which is open data, so editable, downloadable and editable, but not covering all the phases, as I said before. Up to the awarding, for sure. There might be something missing in the planning, and there might be something missing in the payments, because we don't deal payments on our platform, for example. But the tendering phase and the awarding is there. And you can compare this data with the National Contract Registry or Annex website and whatever. Another thing we are doing in order to be more transparent, which is not necessarily using open data, but encouraging transparency and encouraging the commitment of the users, of the citizens, for example, we have launched this interactive map on our website where you can make a close relationship between a region and the money which is spent in that region, so the georeferencing of public expenditure. It's not open data, it's more static, but it is every day updated. And however, you can even download the app from your mobile and check in the region of Lazio how much money is being spent. It's still an aggregated data. But if you want to compare the spending of the public money within the regions and compare it, you can still do it. But there's one thing that CONSIP is doing which didn't come out from the discussion today, not yet, and that I wanted to really share with you. It is a thought. I mean, when I was provocative at the beginning of the session saying, okay, the title of the session is Procurement Changing Through Data, or maybe data is changing procurement. For example, we've been talking about the publication of data, the availability, the engagement, the co-design with the team, but what to do with this data? Are you absolutely certain that you know exactly what to do with this data? You can demonstrate if you have saved money. You can demonstrate you have engaged SMEs and micro enterprises if this is one of your goals, the goals you were mentioning. Some can also go further and say, okay, I saved 1 million and I used it to reduce the cost of chemotherapy. It was mentioned somewhere this morning at the beginning of the session. There's one other thing that data is extremely useful for, which didn't come out. Data allows you to understand the performance and the behavior of the end user. Through a specific way of reading and interpreting data and analyzing data, you understand how the people are performing on Prozorro or on Acquisti in Rete PA, which is the Italian platform. But this needs a skill. There is a pilot in CONSIP now because open data, okay, digitalization, electronic procurement provides you with a huge amount of data. But then there is an opportunity to have it, but then a challenge to interpret it. In one kind of interpretation, you need people skilled in the interpretation and in the use of this data. Data analysis is not something, for example, I don't know how to do. No problem in mentioning that. I'm not doing it, in fact. I'm doing something else. The one thing we learned, and I have to be really positive and say that we learned this from South America, from Chile. In Chile, there is the Chilean central purchasing body named Chile Compra. They explained to us during a joint meeting that they have the Observatorio on their platform. They use this Observatorio, and the word already explains to you what the Observatorio means, to observe the behavior of the companies and of the buyers on their Prozorro, okay? They are observing to detect potential collusion, to detect potential corruption, to detect lack of capacity. In three cases, they take an action. If it's a lack of capacity, then you are momentarily not allowed to use the platform. Your PIN is blocked. They train you on, they try to fill the gap. You didn't know how to do this. They fill the gap by training these guys, and then they authorize, once again, once they have checked the training is there, they authorize them once again to enter and to spend public money, properly. If instead they find potential collusion or cases of corruption, they inform the monitoring authorities. So learning from the Chilean experience, we understood that Italy, the Italian platform, has a huge amount of data, huge. And we are not benefiting from this data because we're not using it or interpreting it or analyzing it still how we should. So the idea of building up something similar to the Observatorio is a pilot now in CONSIP, and it's called MEPA Watch. MEPA is the platform where you can manage low-value purchases from 5,000 euros up to the threshold, where sometimes you don't even publish a notice, you can make a direct order, you don't invite 3, 5, or 10, or 20 enterprises. Here, we are trying to develop this pilot. We call it MEPA Watch. It's a kind of observatorio of the MEPA to test the Chilean experience and to embed it into the Italian platform. If they ask for, they do. More and more. If they ask for the data, we provide them the data. Of course, the Guardia di Finanza, ANAC, everybody can get government our data and specific data which is not visible. We are not fully compliant to the OECDS standard, okay, as I said before. Thank you for the question. This has given me the opportunity to explain something about open data and transparency in Italy, but I think there was one more question here and here. The last two questions? Okay, thank you. We have 5 minutes more.
Alexandro, I think you presented very, very well. And when you presented, I was trying to connect with my experience with the Indian government, because as I said, I live in Australia, but I am originally from India. One thing that I was not quite sure about, the changes that you led, and finally you think that it is a successful system, it is up and running at this moment, but you had to come out of the system because you didn't like it or whatever it is. So I think that there is an equation here between the political system and the changes that you led. Any changes that you like to bring into the political system, there has to be a hero within the political system. So that hero has to be a minister who is powerful enough to be able to change the system within their current operations. So just question here is that, how did you go with that minister in charge who is powerful enough to be able to lead these particular changes, and yet getting the political mileage that something is happening in our country, guys, everybody be part of it? So did that happen at all?
This is a question different for a long discussion. Why I left Prozoro? Because I am a startupper as my character, and Prozoro is definitely finished on a startup phase. Now it's a big, huge government project, rather sustainable, with a lot of data, with a lot of civil society engagement, and Prozoro doesn't need me anymore. I switched to another reform, which is a civil service reform, where I try to create the same story, the big platform about the data about civil servants, people transactions, people accounting, HR data, etc., etc. It wouldn't be so open, of course, but it can make the system more manageable. So I found finally my next startup and joined there. The question, which advices to give to the minister to keep political trust and still change in something? This is a huge discussion about the democracy and how it works. Currently in Ukraine, we have a very interesting situation. We elected as a president the most famous comedian in the country. And now one of the most famous singer is a leading candidate for parliament. So we have a very interesting situation where very popular, from a society point of view, very popular people come to the politics because usual politics failed with their job, honestly. And we have a chance to restart the civil service and restart the political parties from scratch. Let's see how it works. But for now, I think that all new ministers will have enough political power and support from the society to do whatever changes they want to do. I at least hope on that, because the civil service reform probably even more complex than the public procurement reform, because all these HR departments in the ministries, they're usually the most conservative people in the room.
Hi, I'm a student of IMPPM this generation, and I would like to ask you something, because we already had an entire module about e-procurement, and we saw all the pro and cons of e-procurement. And one of the most cons that we have seen is that when you are sharing all data, you can actually foster collusion and all this kind of behavior. We have already had an answer from the Italian point of view about all those data. They are actually using tools to see if there are cartels or whatever. But I was quite impressed by your example that you were also sharing data with passport data that are sensible data and things like this. So do you think that those kind of, all those informations, I understand the needs of your country, but besides your needs, do you think that sharing all those information could be really dangerous? Because you know all your competitor, you can have a general overview about what's happening in your country.
The short answer is yes, because I personally believe in openness and transparency. And I think that the more transparent and digitalized the system is, the more civilized and developed is your government and your public procurement system. And of course, any political decision has pros and cons. And of course, you have the price of implementing e-procurement. For example, the cyber threat when you keep all the data in one place and this place can be destroyed definitely. You are increasing the level of risk massively. But this is not the cause not to do the changes. What I found out, originally I'm a businessman, I didn't know anything about the government, but what interesting I found in the government, in public administration, that you don't have any clear policy improvements without a price. You always have additional risks, additional price that you have to pay to make your infrastructure, your ecosystem more civilized. And I hugely believe myself that e-procurement is much more civilized and developed than paper procurement, what we are discussing here. I don't know if I answer your question. So we understood the threats, and nevertheless, by accepting this risk, we pushed this reform forward.
My concern was about the data that you are publishing, especially because you say that you publish everything, also the bidders, that they are not winning bidders.
So we are publishing, for example, the copies of passports. So what? We are not publishing PIN codes or something like that because they are usually saved on the platform principle. No Google show you. No Google or Facebook or any platform show you your password. It's kept in a different way. So what we are publicizing, the information about all the candidates for this tender, the Good Contracting Authority usually does the pretender conference where it sees all potentials bidders in any way. So again, by creating these artificial burdens, you're making the system more complex, and I don't understand what you gain from there. Again, this is my personal observations and feelings, and I don't insist that everybody should do this way.
No, I totally agree with Alexander. Can I just ask you, what kind of issue, what concern would you have in, where do you see the danger in the availability of this data?
Can I?
Thank you.
The issue with the passports, if is so the criminals right now know where they can find data if they want to falsify the passports and to have falsified passport. There is the issue.
We are not disclosing passwords.
You just say that you're publishing the data for passports.
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 Not passwords.
What?
No, we are disclosing with passport, and so what?
No passport.
No passport.
Not passport. No passport.
The thing that you are showing on the border.
I've been misunderstood. Okay.
ID, yes. Sorry for misusing the word. Yeah, showing all your passport, it will be an interesting mess in the country.
Grazie, Alexander. I think we can close. I have an important information before leaving the last 20 seconds to, just a second, last 20 seconds to Kathrin. Annalisa, correct me if I'm right. We don't have half an hour coffee break, but only 10 minutes coffee break in 1 minute.
Great. So I just want to say I really liked what Angela said before, that, you know, procurement is a reform, and we heard now a lot from Alex about how comprehensive and complex these reforms can be, because it's everything from having a goal to finding the right technology, the technical solutions, but then the team comes in and navigating the politics and doing all of that. So we have seen that can feel quite lonely. I'm sure Alex, you know, he was lucky at that point that he had this team of volunteers, but not everyone has that. And I suspect that even with the team of volunteers, it still felt sometimes like a lonely fight to be the lone wolf. So at the Open Contracting Partnership, we have a program that we call LIFT. And it is for any reformers, for any procurement reformers that are trying to solve a specific problem. So if you are trying to improve the quality of a good works or service, and you want to know and learn from people like Alex, this program is for you. It gives free support, technical, but also on change management to selected teams that are trying to solve service delivery problems through procurement. So we have the information here. Some of you were interested in the Mythbusting report. We have that here as well. So feel free to step up and take it. And we thank you very much for staying awake with us after lunch.